technology, there's been a lot of simulation. And we've contributed to that as well. So if you look at what we have on the top, this is essentially simulating the electrical channel. And what we're showing here is pretty much in line with what you'll see in the industry, and we've talked with some of our colleagues on the call here today. And 16 dB for the channel loss is about the ballpark where most people land. That can change, and a lot of that depends on then getting into the next level of integration, where you really have a co-design, where you're looking at the output of the SerDes, the characteristics of the optical engine and the channel itself. And that's one difference we see compared to pluggables is when you move to CPO, NPO, it really does become more of a co-design. But part of what we're interested in, what we wanted to show here, is the transition from simulation to really starting to validate some of the hardware. So these are only initial results, but what we are excited to show is that basically we've been able to bring up these NPOs, these optical engines. We're able to see stable operation across all 32 channels. So we're really moving from theory to that testing. Now, this is only initial results. And what we're able to show is, albeit with a very low electrical loss channel, we're able to show stable operation. And more importantly, that we can meet the TP2 performance targets. Now, this is just step one. So part of what comes next is the continuation of the validation. And a big part of that is now extending that electrical loss. So coming up with new measurements that show the impact of increasing that loss. And in that, there's multiple goals. One is to help validate the simulation, so do correlation of data. But also the overall goal here is to establish manufacturing operating margin so that we can have confidence that this can be deployed in the millions in the field. So this one here is more an observation that we've pulled together. And essentially, the core takeaway is that the different aspects of this technology mature at different rates. So when we look at the electrical channel and the optical engines, we see more comfort coming around that as sort of data starts to come together. And we solutions and how they interact. With the external lasers, there's lots of operational data we can pull based on the pluggables that are in the field today. For the remaining ones, we characterize those as earlier on the learning curve. That's not necessarily a bad or surprising thing. With every new technology, one of the key takeaways is that different aspects of technologies mature at different rates. Next slide. Thanks. And here, what we wanted to do was sort of provide an overview again of where we see the market headed. So number one, for to start off, we see CPO and NPO starting off with external lasers. That helps with the flexibility of deployment and reduces risk for the first generation. That said, we do see things going forward more towards an integrated approach. So basically improving the density and integrating those lasers into the optical engine, and then continuing that integration into more of a hybrid integration. So again, it's all about the densification and making this smaller, so you migrate from 100 to 200 T switches and greater. The last one could be a little more debatable, which I guess we won't have time to get into tonight, but then you get into sort of different technologies such as OCI, which again, bring in sort of additional advantages as well. So when we look at this path forward, what we see is, directionally, we see this is where things are headed. And it's not so much a question of if it's headed in this direction. It's more a question of when the different technologies here are not just adopted, but when they're ready to be adopted and have the data behind them so we can do so comfortably. And next slide. So again, very, very short presentation just to share some of our views on where we think the market is headed. There's a lot of innovation, a lot of attention into this market, And one of the things we see is that although that innovation is very attractive, There's lots of funding dollars being put into it, lots of good research. Still have to keep focus on some of the deployment challenges. So it's not all about performance, it's about being able to ensure these things are reliable, they're operationally safe, and they can be deployed. Now, part of that does come back to technical validation. And in order to tick all these boxes, we have to be able to show manufacturing margin as well. So, because we're looking at scaling this into the millions and millions of pieces. And finally, we do think sort of there are multiple architectures that will coexist. If you look historically back, the greatest thing would have been if there was one pluggable to satisfy all applications. And the reality is we never actually achieve that. But what happens is for each application, different solutions will have different merit and is evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So it's just a little view on where we see the market as headed for the CPO and NPO.
Thank you, Justin. Just a quick question for you. On the thermal management, do you expect